Christmas is supposed to be a season for togetherness, joy, and family traditions. For me, though, it turned into the day everything I thought I knew came crashing down. My name's Kevin. I'm 34, and I was married to Britney, the woman I genuinely believed I'd grow old with. We'd been together for 7 years, and I never doubted her, not for a second. That was until I discovered she was secretly involved with her personal trainer, Justin. The unraveling began at our family Christmas gathering. Britney's family takes the holidays seriously, so we were all gathered at her parents' house for their big annual celebration. Her younger sister, Rachel, was there too. Rachel's always been the family rebel, bold, independent, and unafraid to speak her mind. Where Britney came across as polished and poised, Rachel was lively and unpredictable, like a firecracker waiting to go off. That day, something about Britney seemed off. She kept sneaking away with her phone, and she wasn't exactly subtle about it either, quick bursts of laughter and rapid typing giving her away. I told myself it was just holiday stress, but the thought lingered. Then Rachel approached me while Britney was busy in the kitchen. "You need to see this," she murmured, holding out her phone. The moment my eyes landed on the screen, my stomach dropped. It was Britney's Instagram DMs with someone going by CT Trainer, which I quickly realized was Justin. The messages were explicit, full of promises to meet in places I knew all too well. "You don't deserve this, Kevin," Rachel said softly. I couldn't even form a reply. A flood of emotions, anger, shame, heartbreak, all hit me at once. The festive atmosphere around us suddenly felt mocking, like the universe was in on the joke. "I'm not letting her destroy this family," Rachel added, her green eyes fierce. "You deserve so much more than this." Her words cut deep, and it became clear to me in that instant, this wasn't just a small fracture in our marriage. It was the end. The days that followed were a blur of pain and reflection. Rachel's words and the sincerity in her eyes replayed in my mind over and over. Britney, meanwhile, was oblivious, too wrapped up in her so-called yoga sessions to notice the shift in me. That's when I decided I wouldn't let this betrayal go unanswered. I wasn't looking for childish payback, I wanted her to feel the sting of betrayal just like I had. During that time, Rachel and I grew closer. We found ourselves talking late into the night, opening up in ways I never expected. She confided in me about always feeling overshadowed by Britney, constantly living in the shadow of her perfect older sister. I admitted that I'd ignored the warning signs in my marriage for far too long, convincing myself everything was fine. Things finally reached a boiling point on New Year's Eve. Once again, the whole family gathered at her parents' house. Britney, predictably, was glued to her phone, likely texting Justin, while I pretended not to care. As the clock ticked closer to midnight, I found myself alone in the kitchen with Rachel. "I can't believe she'd treat you like this," Rachel said, her voice low but seething with frustration. "She doesn't give a damn," I replied, bitterness coating every word. Rachel moved closer, her fingers lightly brushing against mine. "I care, Kevin," she whispered, her voice steady and sincere. "I care a lot more than she ever did." Her words lingered in the air, thick with meaning. Before I could think, I leaned in, and our lips met in a kiss that was raw and full of emotion, like every ounce of pain and anger was pouring out all at once. The fireworks outside signaled the start of a new year, but the real explosion came inside. Britney walked into the kitchen just as Rachel and I were locked in each other's arms. "What the hell is going on?" she shrieked, her face twisting in shock and fury. "Consider it payback," I said, my arms still wrapped around Rachel. "You've been screwing Justin for months. Did you really think I wouldn't figure it out?" The room fell silent as the rest of the family gathered to see what was happening. Britney stammered, trying to deny it, but Rachel was ready. She calmly pulled out her phone and showed everyone the incriminating messages. The expression on Britney's parents' faces was unforgettable, pure disappointment and disgust carved into every wrinkle. "You've shamed this family," her father said, his voice quivering with restrained anger. "And you've thrown away a good man." That night, I walked out with Rachel while Britney stayed behind, watching her once flawless world begin to collapse. Little did she realize, this was just the start of her downfall. For the first time in a long while, I felt something stir inside me, a sense of freedom, like I had finally taken the reins of my life. The fireworks from New Year's Eve, the ones bursting in the sky and the ones inside that kitchen, left me standing in unfamiliar territory. The sound of Britney's screeches still rang in my head, but oddly enough, I found them satisfying. She had set this chain of events in motion, and now she was the one paying the price. Britney's parents, longtime champions of family unity, were furious. Rachel and I left together, their disapproving eyes glued to Britney as she scrambled for excuses no one cared to hear. We ended up at Rachel's apartment, a warm, cluttered little place, the total opposite of the pristine, magazine-worthy home Britney had insisted on. Rachel poured me a glass of wine, our hands brushing lightly as she passed it over. "You hanging in there?" she asked, her voice softer than I'd ever heard it before. I shook my head and smiled faintly. "I should be asking you that. You just torched every bridge you had with your family for me." Rachel shrugged, but the way her eyes dropped told me there was more beneath the surface. "I'm done pretending Britney's this perfect little angel. She had this coming." We sank into her couch, the weight of the evening settling between us. I half expected an awkward silence, but instead, I felt at ease. Rachel had always been the unpredictable one, the wild card who didn't bother with rules or expectations. And now, I understood why. She was the only one who had ever seen Britney for who she really was. The days that followed felt surreal. Rachel and I drifted closer in ways I hadn't seen coming. Sure, there was undeniable physical chemistry between us, but it was more than that. She made me laugh, kept me grounded, and called me out when I felt sorry for myself. She reminded me that my life wasn't over. Meanwhile, Britney was unraveling. She showed up unannounced at Rachel's apartment one evening, pounding on the door with enough force to wake the neighbors. "You're really throwing away our entire marriage over some stupid messages," she shouted the second I opened the door. I leaned against the frame, my tone cold and sharp. "Stupid messages? You slept with him, Britney. Don't insult me by pretending it was nothing." Her makeup was smudged, her hair disheveled, she looked like she hadn't slept in days. "It didn't mean anything, Kevin. I was lonely. You were always so distant." I could feel the heat rising in my chest. Distant? I was working my ass off to build a life for us. And while I was doing that, you were off screwing your trainer. Rachel stepped up behind me, arms crossed and gaze steady. "You need to leave, Britney. You're not wanted here." Britney's face twisted into something bitter and ugly. "You're nothing but a cheap stand-in," she spat at Rachel. "He'll grow tired of you too." Rachel didn't even blink. "Maybe. But at least I'm not the one who destroyed my marriage." Britney stormed off, slamming the door behind her. And as it clicked shut, I felt nothing but relief. It was like a weight had finally lifted. In the following weeks, Rachel and I became inseparable. She was everything Britney wasn't, unapologetic, spontaneous, and fiercely loyal. Our time together wasn't just a way to fill the void, we genuinely enjoyed each other's company. Still, the aftershocks of New Year's Eve lingered. Britney's parents barely spoke to her. They couldn't forgive the embarrassment she had brought upon the family. Even her siblings seemed to keep their distance. For years, I had assumed Britney was the golden child, but now I saw the cracks that had been there all along. Rachel had been the family outcast for as long as I could remember, the one everyone blamed for their problems. But now, with Britney's halo shattered, they seemed ready to embrace Rachel for who she really was. "You know," Rachel said one evening as we sat out on her balcony, the city lights flickering in the distance, "this isn't just about Britney. It's about finally breaking free from everything they expected of me. I nodded, and for the first time, I truly felt like I understood her. And what about us? I asked, watching the way her lips curled into a faint, playful smile. What exactly are we doing here? She glanced at me, eyes dancing with a mischievous glint. We're writing our own rules, Kevin. That's the plan. But the peace didn't last long. Britney, desperate to claw back some semblance of control, flipped the story. She started spreading rumors among our mutual friends, claiming I had been the one to stray first, that Rachel had seduced me long before she ever got involved with Justin. It was absurd, almost comical, but it forced me to confront something I hadn't fully acknowledged, how much Britney's betrayal had shifted something inside me. The funny thing was, I didn't care. The man I used to be, the one obsessed with keeping up appearances, always making sure everything looked perfect from the outside, was gone. In his place stood someone who valued truth and loyalty, no matter how messy life got. Rachel never wavered. Her unwavering defiance shielded me from the whispers and sideways glances. Let her say whatever she wants, Rachel told me one night, leaning back against the couch with that same easy confidence. The truth has a way of showing up eventually. And she was right. Britney's lies unraveled almost as fast as her affair had been exposed. Justin vanished from the picture, apparently uninterested in anything beyond a casual fling. Her friends pulled away, and even her family began to keep their distance. In the end, all Britney had left were the consequences she tried so hard to outrun. Meanwhile, Rachel and I were quietly building something real. It wasn't perfect, nothing ever is, but it was honest. For the first time in a long while, I felt like I could finally exhale. Lying beside Rachel one night, her head resting gently against my chest, I realized this wasn't just about getting even. This was the start of something new. Life with Rachel wasn't neat or predictable. It was chaotic, passionate, and unfiltered. Where Britney had controlled every detail, Rachel embraced the imperfections. I was healing. Slowly, but surely. That said, I wasn't naive. I knew this road wouldn't be smooth, especially with Britney still clinging to whatever shards of her reputation she could salvage. The rumors didn't stop. If anything, they grew louder. Old friends started reaching out, some curious, others flat out accusing me of being the reason our marriage unraveled. Kevin, I need to know the truth, Danielle, one of our couple friends, messaged me late one evening. Did you really cheat on Britney with her sister? She cheated first, I responded bluntly. If you don't believe me, check her DMs with her trainer. The silence that followed stretched long enough for me to picture Danielle's face as the pieces slowly clicked into place. By the next day, I heard Britney had cut ties with Danielle after she confronted her about the lies. Britney's grip on our social circle was slipping fast. It all came to a boiling point one Saturday afternoon. I was in Rachel's kitchen, pouring coffee, when I heard Britney's voice at the door, loud, angry, and unmistakably desperate. "You're tearing this family apart, Rachel," she yelled. I leaned against the counter, coffee mug in hand, curious to see how Rachel would handle it. Tearing the family apart? Rachel shot back, her tone dripping with sarcasm. "Britney, you had an affair. You shattered Kevin, and now you're pissed because he's with someone who actually treats him better." Britney's voice trembled. "He's my husband." I set the mug down and stepped into the living room, locking eyes with her. "No, Britney," I said, calm but firm. "Not anymore. You threw that away." Her gaze snapped toward me, and for the briefest moment, I saw the woman I had once loved, the woman I thought I'd grow old with. But just as quickly, that flicker faded, and the bitterness returned. A sneer twisted across her face. "You're disgusting," Britney spat, her eyes flicking between me and Rachel. "You two deserve each other." Rachel let out a sharp, bitter laugh. "Appreciate it, Britney. I'll take that as a compliment." The door slammed hard enough to rattle the frames on the wall as Britney stormed out. Rachel turned to me, a faint pink creeping into her cheeks. "She's not going to stop, is she?" I sighed, leaning back against the counter. "She'll wear herself out eventually," I said, though I wasn't entirely convinced. The truth was, Britney's desperation was getting worse. A week later, my phone buzzed with a call from my boss. "Kevin, we need to talk," he said, his tone unusually stiff. "There's been a complaint." I didn't need to ask who filed it. Britney had accused me of messing around with a coworker while we were still married. It was a lie, but that didn't stop the wheels from turning. The HR investigation was quick, no evidence, no case, but by the time it wrapped up, the stress had already done its damage. Rachel was livid. "She's trying to ruin your life just because she can't deal with the mess she made," she fumed. "She's desperate," I said, rubbing the back of my neck. "But we're not going to let her win." That's when Rachel hit me with one of her wild ideas. The kind that could either solve everything or blow up spectacularly in our faces. "Let's throw a party," she said, stretched out across the couch with her legs over mine. I raised an eyebrow. "A party?" "A family dinner," she clarified, sitting up with a spark in her eyes. "Like Christmas. We'll invite everyone, her parents, her siblings, even her. And then we tell the truth. Everything." I stared at her, trying to figure out if she was serious. "You really think her family's going to take our side?" Rachel shrugged casually. "They're already pissed at her. They just need a little push in the right direction." It was a gamble, but it felt right. Britney had been hiding behind rumors and twisted stories for long enough. It was time to set the record straight. We scheduled the dinner for the following weekend. Rachel and I spent the next few days planning and prepping, making sure there wouldn't be any holes for Britney to slip through. By the time the day rolled around, my stomach was tied in knots. I had no clue how this would shake out, but I knew we had to see it through. Britney showed up last, walking in with her head held high but her eyes scanning the room with caution. She wasn't expecting the invitation, and I could tell by the way her gaze lingered when it landed on me and Rachel. "What's all this?" she asked, her tone sharp enough to cut glass. Rachel stepped forward, standing just close enough to me that Britney couldn't miss the message. "It's about the truth," Rachel said calmly. "We're here to clear the air." For the next hour, we laid everything bare. The affair. The messages. The lies she told everyone. Screenshots, DMs, everything was right there for her family to see. By the time we finished, the room was thick with silence. Britney's mother was the first to speak, her voice trembling with disbelief. "Britney, how could you?" she whispered, the disappointment clear in every word. Britney opened her mouth, but whatever excuse she had planned fell flat. There was nothing left to say. "You need help," her father said firmly, his eyes cold. "And until you get it, you're not welcome here." For a brief moment, I saw something crack in Britney's expression. A flicker of regret, maybe even sadness. But it was fleeting, gone as quickly as it appeared. She'd built this mess, and now she had to live in it. Later that night, after everyone had left, Rachel and I sat on the floor, surrounded by empty plates and half-finished glasses of wine. Rachel handed me a glass, grinning. "We actually pulled it off." I slipped an arm around her waist, pulling her closer. "Yeah, we did." But even as I said it, I knew this wasn't over. Britney wasn't the kind to disappear quietly, and I had no doubt she'd find another way to stir the pot. The difference now? I had Rachel standing beside me. And that made all the difference. The morning after the dinner, my phone lit up with a string of frantic messages from Britney. "Britney, how could you humiliate me like that? You turned my entire family against me. Britney, you're cruel, Kevin. I made a mistake, but this is heartless. Britney, do you really think you and Rachel will last? She's using you. When she's bored, you'll mean nothing to her. I didn't respond. There wasn't anything left to say. Rachel and I had been honest, and Britney's lies had unraveled in front of everyone. I wasn't about to let her drag me back into her whirlwind of manipulation. But Britney wasn't the only one feeling the ripple effect. Her trainer, Justin, hadn't escaped the fallout either. I later found out that Britney's parents had lodged a formal complaint with his gym, citing his involvement with a married client. At the time, I didn't think much of it. But about a week later, word got around, Justin had been let go. Serves him right, Rachel remarked when I told her. He knew exactly what he was getting into. I couldn't argue with that. Justin, just like Britney, had made his choices. And now, they were both dealing with the consequences. Life with Rachel was slowly becoming the new normal. There were still moments where we stumbled, trying to figure out where we stood. It was exciting, but it also felt complicated, like we were rewriting the script as we went along. One evening, as we lay in bed, Rachel shifted to face me, her expression softer than usual. "Do you ever wonder where this is heading?" she asked quietly. I paused for a second, trying to gather my thoughts. "I think about it more than I let on," I admitted. "But I don't have all the answers yet." She nodded, though I could see her mind was elsewhere. I can't be part of some rebound phase, Kevin. I've spent enough of my life living in Britney's shadow. I need to know this isn't some reaction to her." I brushed a strand of hair behind her ear, letting my hand linger. "This isn't about Britney," I said softly. "It's about us, Rachel. You've never been like her, not once. And what we have, whatever it is real." Her lips curved into a small smile, and for the first time, I felt something that resembled hope. Maybe we really could build something lasting out of the wreckage. The weeks that followed were quieter, but Britney hadn't fully disappeared from the picture. One afternoon, I found a letter from her lawyer sitting in the mailbox. She was suing me for defamation, claiming that the dinner had tarnished her reputation and caused emotional harm. It was ridiculous, given the sheer amount of proof stacked against her, but it still caught me off guard. Rachel, of course, was unfazed. "Let her go for it," she said with a shrug, leaning against the kitchen counter. "She doesn't stand a chance. And when she loses, she'll look even worse than she already does." Still, the lawsuit was a stark reminder, Britney wasn't done fighting. If she had to drag both me and Rachel through the dirt to save face, she'd do it without hesitation. The unexpected shift came from Rachel's parents. Up until that point, they'd kept their distance, observing the drama like bystanders at a car crash. But the moment they caught wind of the lawsuit, they stepped in. Rachel's father called me one evening, his voice firm but calm. "Kevin, this has gone too far," he said. "Britney needs help. I think it'd be best for you and Rachel to put some distance between you and all this. Why don't you two take some time at the lake house? It's yours as long as you need." I hesitated. The lake house had always been a family retreat, a place where Britney and I had spent countless summers, back when things were simple. But Rachel took my hand, squeezing it gently. "We need the space," she said softly. "Let's go. Just us." The lake house turned out to be exactly what we needed. Tucked away from the noise, it felt like a different world entirely. We filled our days with hiking, fishing, and long conversations about everything, where we'd been, what we wanted, and the things we were still afraid of. It wasn't perfect, but it felt like the start of something new. One evening, as Rachel and I sat by the fire, she rested her head gently against my shoulder. "I've always loved it here," she murmured, her voice soft against the crackle of the flames. "It feels like a new beginning." I tightened my arm around her, pulling her closer. "That's exactly what it is," I replied. "A fresh start for both of us." Back in the city, Britney's life was unraveling piece by piece. The lawsuit never even reached a courtroom. Her lawyer dropped the case as soon as it became clear we had more than enough proof to bury her claims. Her parents refused to stand by her, and her siblings stopped returning her calls altogether. Britney was isolated, watching helplessly as the carefully curated world she had built collapsed around her. A small part of me felt sorry for her, but the larger part understood that this was the result of her own choices. She'd made this mess, and now she had no choice but to sit in it. Meanwhile, at the lake house, Rachel and I began to quietly piece together what our future might look like. It wasn't all mapped out, and it felt fragile at times, but it was ours to shape. For the first time in what felt like forever, I wasn't just coasting through life, I was actually living it. As the sun dipped behind the trees, painting the water with streaks of gold and pink, I turned to Rachel and smiled. "We're going to be all right," I said, feeling the weight of the past finally starting to lift. She met my gaze, eyes gleaming with quiet confidence. "Damn right we are." The lake house became our sanctuary, but I knew deep down the world outside wouldn't stay quiet forever. For a few blissful weeks, Rachel and I lived in our little bubble, far removed from the chaos Britney had stirred up. But no bubble lasts forever. And neither did our peace. It started with a phone call from an old coworker. "Kevin, is everything okay?" he asked, his voice cautious. I frowned, already sensing something was off. "Yeah, why? You haven't seen it yet, have you?" He sighed heavily. "Britney's been posting stuff online. It's ugly." My stomach twisted as I hung up and opened my social media. Sure enough, Britney had launched a full-blown smear campaign. She painted herself as the victim, claiming I'd been emotionally abusive, that Rachel seduced me while we were still married, and that the family dinner had been a calculated effort to humiliate her. The comment sections were a war zone. Some people believed her, while others called her out on the lies. But the damage was already spreading. Her posts had gone viral. Suddenly, our lives weren't just private anymore, everyone was talking about us. Rachel handled it better than I did. "Let her have her tantrum," she said with a shrug. "The truth always finds its way out." But I wasn't as composed. The thought of strangers dissecting our lives, making judgments about things they didn't understand, left me seething. And Britney knew exactly how to make it sting. She even posted an old photo of us, one from happier days, with the caption, "I gave him everything, and he threw it away for her." That evening, Rachel's parents called. "We saw the posts," her father said, clearly holding back frustration. "She's spiraling. Do you need us to step in?" Rachel answered without hesitation. "No, Dad. We can handle this." I wished I felt as sure as she did. Later that night, I stared at the ceiling, the glow of the fire casting flickering shadows across the room. "What if this never stops?" I asked quietly. "What if she keeps coming after us, Rachel?" Rachel took my hand, giving it a reassuring squeeze. "Then we keep living," she said softly. "That's the best revenge we've got." Living our lives, though, was easier said than done. The posts brought attention we hadn't asked for. Even at the lake house, reporters began showing up, hoping to snag a piece of the unfolding drama. We ignored them, but the cracks in our peaceful retreat were growing more noticeable. One evening, as we sat on the dock watching the last slivers of daylight disappear, Rachel turned to me. "Maybe it's time we stop hiding," she said. "Why should we run from her?" I looked out over the water, considering her words. "You're right," I admitted. "But how do we fight back?" Rachel's eyes sparkled with that familiar spark of mischief. "We tell our side of the story. The real story." It was a bold idea, but something about it felt right. We reached out to an old friend, someone we trusted who worked as a journalist, and agreed to an interview. If Britney wanted to air our dirty laundry, we'd hang hers right alongside it. The interview was raw and unfiltered. We laid it all out, the affair with Justin, the lies, the rumors she'd spread. Rachel opened up, too, sharing how she'd spent years feeling like the family's afterthought, constantly compared to Britney. It wasn't about revenge anymore. It was about reclaiming our truth. I opened up about the betrayal, the gut-wrenching pain of discovering the truth, and the unexpected way it had brought Rachel and me together. When the article went live, it spread like wildfire. The outpouring of support caught me off guard. People saw through Britney's carefully crafted image, and for the first time, I felt like Rachel and I were no longer on the defensive. We were finally reclaiming our story. Britney, however, didn't handle it well. She fired off another long-winded rant online, accusing us of smearing her name, but this time, the response was different. Her words felt hollow, and the audience she once commanded was nowhere to be found. People were tired of the drama. And the more she spiraled, the more isolated she became. Then came the final, crushing blow. Rachel's parents, having had enough of Britney's games, released a public statement. They condemned her actions outright, voicing their full support for Rachel and me. They even urged Britney, plainly and without sugarcoating, to seek professional help. It was a harsh but necessary call-out, and it left Britney standing alone, with no one left in her corner. With Britney's smear campaign fizzling out, Rachel and I could finally breathe. We packed up the lake house and moved to a new city, far enough away to start fresh, away from the lingering whispers and side-eyed glances. The transition wasn't seamless, but it felt right. One evening, as we unpacked boxes in our new apartment, Rachel pulled out an old photo from a family barbecue years back. She held it up, studying it with a soft smile. "Who would have thought we'd end up here?" she said, her tone light but thoughtful. "Not me," I admitted with a chuckle. "But I'm glad we did." Rachel leaned in, her voice barely above a whisper. "Me too." Britney faded into the background, a lingering shadow, but nothing more. Her lies had left her with nothing. She'd lost her family, her reputation, and the life she'd once clung to so tightly. I couldn't bring myself to forgive her. But I realized I didn't need to. Letting go of the anger was enough. Rachel and I weren't flawless, but we were genuine. And after everything we'd endured, that felt like more than enough. It's strange how life can completely unravel and somehow rebuild itself within a single year. What started as a crushing revelation on Christmas had slowly shaped into something I never thought I'd find again: peace, love, and a future I could actually look forward to. Rachel and I were settling into our new city, carving out a life that felt uniquely ours. Britney, though, still lingered at the edges, like a distant storm that never fully passes. Her social media tirades hadn't entirely stopped. Now and then, someone would send me a screenshot of a bitter post or passive-aggressive jab. But at this point, she was talking to an empty room. I felt no urge to respond. One afternoon, while Rachel and I strolled along the waterfront, my phone buzzed with a call from an unfamiliar number. Against my better judgment, I answered. "Kevin," the voice on the other end said softly, almost hesitant. I froze mid-step. Rachel glanced at me, raising an eyebrow. "What do you need, Britney?" I asked, keeping my tone flat. There was a pause. Then a long sigh. Her voice cracked slightly. "I wanted to apologize. For everything." The words caught me off guard. "Why now?" I asked, unable to hide the suspicion in my voice. "Because I've lost it all," she admitted. "My family, my friends, even Justin left. I know I brought this on myself. I wanted to say I'm sorry. For hurting you. For all of it." I stood there, phone pressed to my ear, unsure how to respond. A part of me wanted to hang up. But another part, the part that remembered who she was before everything crumbled, felt an ache of pity. "I accept your apology," I said at last. "But that doesn't rewrite the past, Britney. You made your choices, and I made mine. I know, she replied softly. I just needed you to hear it. The call ended, and I stood there for a moment, letting it sink in. When I told Rachel about it later, she simply nodded. Good, she said calmly. Maybe now she'll finally let go and leave us be. In the months that followed, Rachel and I carved out a life that felt completely our own. We discovered new routines, built friendships with people who knew nothing about the chaos we'd left behind, and made space for new traditions that belonged only to us. The lingering shadows of Britney's betrayal slowly faded, replaced by something far more valuable, a relationship grounded in honesty, laughter, and trust. One evening, as we sat on the balcony, the city lights flickering below us, Rachel glanced over with a glint in her eye. So, what's next for us, Kevin? She asked, her tone teasing but curious. I smiled, stretching back in my chair. Whatever we want it to be. Well, she said, shifting slightly to face me. I was thinking, we could make it official. I raised an eyebrow, caught completely off guard. Official? She smirked and reached into her pocket, pulling out a small velvet box. Life's too short to wait around, she said, popping it open to reveal a sleek silver band. So, what do you say? I blinked, half laughing in disbelief. You know you're stealing my thunder, right? Maybe, she grinned, holding the box closer. But you can make it up to me later. I slipped the ring onto my finger, feeling the weight of it in a way that felt right. Yes, I said, smiling like an idiot. 1,000 times yes. Our wedding was nothing like the grand affair I'd once had with Britney. It was small, intimate, just us, Rachel's parents, and a few close friends. As I stood there, holding Rachel's hands and looking into her eyes, I felt something I hadn't experienced in years. Pure, unshakable happiness. There were no elaborate decorations, no over-the-top venue. Just love, sincerity, and the quiet certainty that I was exactly where I needed to be. Britney never reappeared in our lives after that. The last I heard, she'd packed up and moved to another state, trying to piece together a fresh start. A part of me hoped she'd eventually find peace, but I knew I couldn't carry her weight anymore. She was part of my past. Rachel was my future. As Rachel and I celebrated our first New Year's Eve as husband and wife, I found myself reflecting on the incredible distance I'd traveled over the past year. A year ago, I had stood in the wreckage of my marriage, broken, blindsided, and uncertain of what lay ahead. Now, I was standing beside a woman who saw me for who I was, valued me for it, and loved me without hesitation. As the countdown to midnight began, Rachel leaned in close, her lips brushing my ear. Happy New Year, Kevin, she whispered, her breath warm and familiar. Happy New Year, I whispered back, pulling her into a soft kiss as the clock struck 12. This time, the fireworks weren't from the explosion of betrayal. They were a celebration of something new, something I could finally call my own.